Hello, and welcome to Sunday at Bear Branch, a virtual ministry of the Churches of Christ. We are now rebroadcasting the morning sermon of Brother Brian Barrett, who preaches for our congregation here at Bear Branch in Spurlockville, West Virginia. We hope that you will find the lessons profitable in the study of God's Word and enlightening to the Christian walk. Brother Barrett has been a preacher and teacher in the Churches of Christ for over 40 years, a frequent speaker in gospel meetings, revivals, having worked in TV and radio, and now our internet ministry. We now invite you to open your Bibles and follow along in our lesson of the hour. Now, here's Brian.
Gone is all my debt of sin, a great change is brought within, and to live I now begin, risen from the fall. Yet the debt I did not pay, someone died for me one day, sweeping all the debt away. Jesus paid it all. Jesus died and paid it all, yes, on the cross of Calvary. And my starting heart was melted at his dying call. Oh, his heart in shame was broken on the tree for you and me, yes, and the debt is canceled. Jesus paid it all. Oh, I hope to please him now. Light of joy is on my brow, as at his dear feet I bow, safe within his love. Making his the debt I owe, freedom true he has bestowed. So I'm singing on the road to my home above. Jesus died and paid it all, yes, on the cross of Calvary. And my starting heart was melted at his dying call. Oh, his heart in shame was broken on the tree for you and me, yes, and the debt is canceled. Jesus paid it all. Sinner, not for me alone did the Son of God atone. Your debt too he made his own on the cruel tree. Come to him with all your sin, be as white as snow within. Full salvation you may win, and rejoice with me. Jesus died and paid it all, yes, on the cross of Calvary. And my starting heart was melted at his dying call. Oh, his heart in shame was broken on the tree for you and me, yes, and the debt is canceled. Jesus paid it all.
We continue today in our study of the subject, Hell is Real. This is the third in what is a series of lessons that we're going to be looking at. The premise of that is that you can get most people to believe that there is a heaven, but fewer people believe that there is an everlasting abode awaiting the sinful, where they will be punished and will be kept from God eternally. In today's lesson, if you would, we would encourage you to open your Bibles to Luke chapter 16, and we're going to begin there in verse 19. Luke chapter 16, verse 19. This is Luke's accounting of the discussion that Jesus had concerning what we know as the rich man and Lazarus. Now, I am quite aware that some people believe this to be a parable. And I generally just put it this way: it does not matter. It makes no difference if it is or if it isn't a parable. If it is true, and Jesus is accounting a true situation, then it's a true situation and it don't matter. If it's a parable, every parable that Jesus taught was about true things and true events. Whether he made them up out of his head or whether he had witnessed them, they still were concerning true events. Most, if not all, of the parables that Jesus taught took physical things and applied spiritual purpose to that. Whether it's growing wheat or tares or whatever that we've looked at in previous times, but none of that is something that was not real and was not true. It has, and I'll say this, it has been my personal belief that since Jesus is God, I'm pretty sure that he saw a lot of stupid people do a lot of stupid things while he was still God and before he came to earth. And out of all the stupid things, as well as the good things that people did, he was able to look at those accounts and make spiritual application of them. And so, again, you can take it for whatever it is. The only reason that people want the parable of the rich man and Lazarus to be a parable is that they can deny that hell or torment is real. That's the only reason. If it isn't real, torment isn't real. Now, they could care less if there ever was a rich man, if there ever was a Lazarus. But if it's a parable, their view is that torment is not real. And therefore, again, God is a God of love and he wouldn't punish anybody. And that is pretty much a weak argument. If that were the case, why would Jesus talk about a place of torment when there wasn't one? Why would he, who is known to have always been honest and straightforward in his answers and his teachings, why would he make up something that is not real just to serve a point? And again, if you really spend some time thinking about that, say 30 seconds, you ought to be able to understand that, again, it doesn't matter if it is a parable or if it isn't a parable. But in this parable, Jesus is talking about the fact, and in this teaching, whatever it is, preceding this in verse 13, Jesus had said, "No servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon." Now, we're more familiar with that in the Sermon on the Mount that we have in Matthew's account. But Jesus is talking to them about certain aspects. He is talking about people who, again, are wanting true riches and the things of riches, and are being encouraged to seek not physical riches, but the riches that endure. And he talks about various aspects of sinful nature, and I'm not going to get into all of that. But to summarize or to come to a conclusion after he talks about serving God and serving mammon and what kind of treasure you're looking for, and if you're not faithful to your wife or to your husband, he talks about a lot about sin, and then he talks about the consequences of it. What happens if we decide to serve mammon instead of God? What happens if we have no respect for marriage? What happens if, at least at that time, we had no respect for the covenant that God had with his people? If there is no hell, if there is no judgment, if there is no torment, why can't I serve mammon? What difference does it make? Even if when I sin, God destroys me, when I die and I don't exist anymore, who cares? I won't know nothing about it. When I die, I'll breathe my last breath, everything will go dark, and that's it. That's the end of the book. So again, where is there any warning in those things? Well, friend, if you don't do this, you won't get to heaven. But I won't have no fun here either. I can have all the fun I want here, and I'm gone in the end, and we don't have to worry about it. What is the deterrent from choosing mammon instead of God? To be unfaithful in adultery, fornication, all those other things that are listed in various places. So after Jesus discusses that, he says, there was a certain rich man. Now, it doesn't say that he taught them a parable saying. A lot of times in the gospel writers, when he taught them this parable, he spoke this parable, and he talks about the reason behind it. He does not specifically, Luke does not specifically record such a statement that he spoke a parable or whatever. He just says and quotes Jesus as saying, there was a certain rich man which was clothed in purple and fine linen and fared sumptuously every day. And there was a certain beggar named Lazarus, which was laid at his gate, full of sores, and desiring to be fed with the crumbs which fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, the dogs came and licked his sores. Now, it's kind of interesting in this account because Jesus actually uses a name, Lazarus. Generally, in Jesus' parables, he does not use anybody's name. He just says that there was a man, there was a woman, there was this, there was that. And so he goes into the account, which is the parable. But in this particular parable, he speaks of someone by the name of Lazarus, who was a beggar, who laid at a gate of this rich man, and he desired to be fed by the crumbs which fell from the rich man's table. And rather than getting relief from the rich man, we're told that the dogs came and licked his sores. Now that, again, right before lunch may be a disgusting concept. But there's a couple interesting things here. Jesus doesn't have any problem saying that the beggar's name was Lazarus. Why did he not name the rich man? And again, we're not given an answer. But when we get to the end of the account, I think if you happen to be the family or knew of this individual, you would know something that might be disturbing. Mr. James Smith, or whoever he was, there was a man named James Smith. He was a rich man. He fared scrumptiously day by day. Jesus chooses not to name the rich man, but he has no issue naming Lazarus, which I find, again, an interesting point. But he's been talking about serving God and mammon, worldliness, sin, whatever that is. Mammon is kind of a generic term for anything that's not God. Anything that we would make an idol out of. Even covetousness in the Scriptures is referred to as idolatry by the Apostle Paul. So this rich man was clothed in purple and fine linen. Now, get this. He's not a man who's wearing a three-piece leisure suit he got from Goodwill. All right? This man is wearing purple and fine linen. That's a choice. Purple was one of, if not the most expensive colors that you could have. It was the color of royalty. And so here this person, whoever he is, this rich man, he's rich. He's got to be rich because he dresses himself in purple and fine linen. No sackcloth for this dude. He has fine linen. Not linen, fine linen. These are points that Jesus clearly wants us to understand. Now, we have Lazarus who is not asking for much. He's just asking for what in the old country term was the slop. And Granny got finished cooking and dinner was as she raked everything off into a coffee can. And that either got sent to the pigs for slop mixed with the stuff to feed the pigs, or she gave it to the dogs, whatever, but we generally didn't see it again. He wasn't asking for a seat at the rich man's table. He just wanted some of the scraps. Much like the prodigal son, although he wasn't necessarily, he's not defined as one who was a prodigal or wasteful, but Lazarus just wanted the scraps. That's how bad he was. So we have these differences. The cloak, the purple, that could have probably, what he spent for that could have took care of Lazarus for a considerable amount of time, since his needs were not that much. But that's not what happened with the rich man's money. He wanted to fare sumptuously, splendidly, magnificently. Lydia was said in the book of Acts to be a seller of purple. She was a businesswoman, and she made her living just selling purple. Now, whether that was the dye or whether she produced the dye and dyed cloth and sold purple cloth, it's not specific, but she was a seller of purple. And looking at that, it takes, if I understand what I read correctly, the purple that was generally used came from the shell of a shellfish, and it took about, I think, 10,000 of those crushed shells to make an ounce of purple dye. Now I want you to think about what that would have entailed to get the goo from the shellfish and to produce all of that and get it down to that 1 ounce of purple. Now, I don't know if you've ever dyed anything or not. When I was growing up in the 60s and 70s, tie-dyed was a big thing. Still, few people today, old hippies, kind of still hang to it. But it took a whole lot more than an ounce of dye to fix a t-shirt. So it's no wonder that purple, whether that was the reddish purple or whether it was the bluish purple or whatever it was, the reds and the blues and everything that it took to get to that, very, very expensive. This man lived for mammon. This man served mammon. That's what Jesus is trying to tell us. He fared sumptuously every day. This man's not getting by. When he buys a cloak, it's purple. When he buys linen, it's fine linen. So if he's wearing purple and fine linen, what kind of table did he sit at? Now, we've got to understand it's not the kind of table that we normally think of, but I want you to think about it. The table, the cushions that would have been there probably instead of the chairs as we think of. What did he have on his windows? You know, all of this, you know, if he personally was wearing purple and fine linen, what was the rest of his house like? And we're told that he had a gate. He lived in a gated community. That's, you know, we kind of say that, you know, you don't want to be troubled with just any old body knocking on your door. So, you know, in present day, we have gated communities. You got to have access to get in there. So he lived in a house which was gated so that he didn't have to be troubled with anything he didn't want to be troubled with. And even though Lazarus laid at the gate sick with sores, the dogs licked those sores, we're never told by Jesus that the rich man ever had any of the crumbs taken out and given to him. Now, there's lots of reasons for that. And again, Jesus doesn't say, but, you know, you feed a stray cat, you got yourself a cat. You feed a stray person, you got to take responsibility for that person. If you're going to feed him, then what are we going to do about the sores? What are we going to do about his clothes? We're going to bring him in where I'm at and let him, you know, could. This is not who this man was. Just not the man's mindset. Everything he did for himself, for his pleasure, and to announce to the world, look at me, look at me. You're not like me. See that purple? You can't have that. You couldn't afford that. You just can't get it. And so this is the way he lived versus the way in which Lazarus lived. Now, he could have made many different choices. Jesus spoke of the rich fool, not necessarily this person, but he did speak about a rich fool. God blessed the rich fool. He had abundance. His crops came forth. And, what am I going to do with this? Well, I'll tear down my barns. I'll build bigger barns. I'll be able to kick back, take it easy, and say to my soul, I've got stuff stored up for years. Eat, drink, be merry. Enjoy the fruits of your life. Jesus asked him a question. This night your soul shall be required of thee, and then who shall all these things be? Everything that you've worked for will just end up feeding somebody else. Get sold off, get stolen, whatever. So we have this guy who had options. He had options. God doesn't say that we should clothe ourselves. Matter of fact, when God sent the man and woman out of the garden, he made clothes for them out of animal skins. God doesn't say we have to be naked. But it's how we choose to use the things that are there. And so we have Lazarus, who was a beggar, and I doubt seriously that he was clothed in fine linen, and most certainly not purple, or he would have sold that off. And so it says, it came to pass, verse 22, that the beggar died, that is Lazarus, and was carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom. Now this tells me that as Jesus was talking to Jewish people, that he's talking about those who were within the covenant. The fact that Lazarus was a beggar, the fact that he didn't have anything, did not necessarily mean that he didn't put his trust in God or have a desire for God, that he was not a child of the covenant, that he was not circumcised on the 8th day. Life has just not been as good to Lazarus as it was this rich man. But we're told that the beggar died and was carried by the angels. Notice that plural. We sing a song about the death angel or the angel of death. Well, Jesus uses the plural here. He was carried by the angels. How many angels, I don't know, but angels implies at least two. So when he breathed his last breath, he was carried by at least two angels into the bosom of Abraham. Now, again, we can go to Matthew chapter 22, and Jesus asked a question there when they were talking about the resurrection. He said, have you never read where in the scriptures where God said, I am the God of Abraham, I am the God of Isaac, I am the God of Jacob? God is not the God of the dead, but he's the God of the living. And so God told Moses, I am the God of Abraham. Well, where is Abraham? Well, apparently he's somewhere where the angels are, or at least where angels are. May not be necessarily heaven, because we're not there yet, but he's alive and he's well on the other side. And this beggar was carried by the angels, plural, into the bosom of Abraham for his care. There was no greater statement that could have been made to a Jewish person than to say that when someone had passed, he was in the bosom of Abraham. Because Abraham was the father of the Jewish people. He was revered as much or almost as Moses. He was the father of the Jewish people. He was the man of faith. He is the man who God called out of Babylon. So the angels carry him into Abraham's bosom. Now it's interesting that when we look at the other end, it says the rich man also died and was buried. Now that don't even roll off the tongue well. I mean, you have this magnificent picture that Lazarus died and he was lifted up by the angels and he was carried into the bosom of Abraham. The rich man also died and they buried him. I mean, you have this glorious picture and then just sort of a matter-of-fact statement. Even up to this point, something is not right with this picture. And I don't know what it is yet, and we haven't got all the way down through there, and I know most of you have already read this, but consider those who are hearing it the first time. You know, something already doesn't sound right with what Jesus is saying here. There's a lot of things that are kind of twisted around and you know, glorious and just matter of fact. And in verse 23, and if you notice in verse 22, there's a semicolon placed in there implying that this was not the end of the sentence. So we have this matter-of-fact statement that he was buried, and, tying this together, in hell he lifted up his eyes, being in torments, and seeth Abraham afar off, and Lazarus in his bosom. Now again, it's far off. Not near, they're not side by side. It's far off. The word hell here is the Greek word Hades, which we speak of as the Hadean realm. It's not the final abode that we're speaking of. But I want us to understand that God's concept of answering for what we've done doesn't just start in the resurrection, but it starts as soon as we die. Carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom, dead and buried and in hell, torment, he sees Lazarus afar off. Being in torments, well, I just don't think a loving God would do that. Friends, this is Jesus who died for us, and he's talking about it. This isn't Luke just talking about it. This is Jesus talking about it. Because Luke wouldn't know anything about where Abraham was, knows nothing about how angels carry you into the bosom of God. He doesn't understand anything necessarily other than some few minor concepts. But Luke says being in torments, even at that time. Now, he's not being formally judged. He's just in prison. Now, you commit a crime, the police will put you in handcuffs. They here will take you to probably, at least from our home, will take you to the Western Regional Jail. They will book you and they will put you in jail. Now, you've not been formally tried, but you're treated as a convict. They don't give you keys to the door to let yourself in and out. They don't give you a kitchen to make whatever food you want. You're a prisoner. And you're held there until either bail or until the trial, depending on what the case may be and the situation. Lazarus is in the bosom of Abraham and is implied that it is in peace. But this man is in the Hadean realm in torments. So we can make a certain assumption in this, that this is not paradise that the rich man is in. In Luke 23:43, when the thief on the cross asked Jesus, "Remember me when thou comest in thy kingdom," he said, "This day shalt thou be with me in paradise." Well, when we talk about the Hadean world, I don't think this is the paradise that Jesus was talking about. It sounds more like the Abraham side of this great gulf, a place of peace and happiness and rest. That sounds more like what Jesus means when he says paradise. Here is a place that's still referred to as Hades, but this is a realm where there is torment. Now, Peter in his Sermon on the Mount, or Peter in his sermon on the day of Pentecost, says, and he quotes from David, that thou wilt not leave my soul in hell, neither will thou suffer thy Holy One to see corruption. And again, it's the same word, Hades, but it's clear that Jesus didn't go into torment, but he went into paradise. So the Hadean realm is divided into a place of paradise for rest from those who are faithful and suffering, many times even in this life, versus torment for those who are guilty. No recycling. You're not reincarnated and and sent back. And he cried and said, "Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus that he may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am tormented," there's that word again, "in this fire." Now, again, when Jesus comes, he'll come in flaming fire, taking vengeance on them that know not God, and all of that. But even at death, the rich man is not in some kind of limbo, but he clearly states that he is in torment, and he is tormented so much that he believes that if Lazarus would just dip the tip of his finger in water and touch it to his tongue, it would bring relief. That's crazy. I've been thirsty, but I never at any time in my life believed that if I could just have a drop of water, that would take care of my thirst. That just a drop of water, when I've been thirsty, when I've been hot, I could, again, drink the garden hose dry. I'm one of those, 60 kids who actually drank from a water hose, and I'm still alive today. But again, we'd get out in the yard and play, and we'd get hot, go crank up the garden hose. I don't remember anybody just saying, "Well, let me stick my tip of my finger in there while y'all drinking, just let me have a drop." But it shows the degree of torment and anxiety that this man was in. And Abraham said, "Son." This tells me that this person was a son of the covenant. Son. Son, remember. Oh, those are two difficult words. A son of Abraham, but in torment. Called to remember. Will we remember after this life? Son, remember. Remember that thou in thy lifetime receivest thy good things, and likewise Lazarus evil things. But now he is comforted, and thou art tormented. Both of those were sons of the covenant. He's comforted, you're tormented. Remember what? Son, remember that purple that you were so proud of? Remember that fine linen that you wore out into public with that purple robe? Remember the feasts that you gave, the parties that you had, all those sumptuous pillows and fancy tables. You've had your turn in paradise. Remember. Now, Lazarus gets his chance at paradise, and you are tormented. And beside all this, between us and you, there is a great gulf fixed. Emphasis is on great gulf and fixed. That means it's permanent. It's locked. So that they which would pass from hence to you cannot. Neither can they pass to us that would come from thence. See, we've said the fact that God has to do something with us after we're gone. What's he going to do with us? Yeah, he could annihilate the evil. But in this, there is no annihilating the evil, but there is most definitely a fixed separation. You can't come here and I can't go there. And you know what? If I was a betting person, if Abraham would have gave him a bucket of water and said, will you go into that fire to give it to him? Lazarus would have probably said yes. And Abraham says, that's why there's a great gulf fixed. Not only can you not come to us, but we can't come to you either. As much as we're concerned about you in life, we're concerned about you in death. But, that's over. Our destinies are in two different directions. You can't come here, we can't come there. Then he said, I pray thee therefore, Father, that thou would send him to my father's house. For I have 5 brethren, that he may testify unto them, lest they also come into this place of torment. Now we get even more enlightenment. There's 5 more plus his father, if he's still alive. At least 5 brothers that he's concerned of in his father's house, and probably the family with them. And again, if I was a betting man, I would bet that they're all sitting around the table in purple and fine linen. Daddy took good care of them. Daddy worked hard. Daddy got stuff. Daddy didn't deny them anything they wanted. They got everything they wished for. Daddy served mammon to the fullest possible. If you can't help me, help my brothers. Abraham said unto him, they have Moses and the prophets, which of course in Jesus' day it's all there was. There was no New Testament. They have Moses and the prophets, let them hear them. Hebrews 9:27 says it's appointed unto man once to die and then the judgment. You get one choice. We don't come back for good reasons or bad reasons. We don't come back. And he said, nay, Father Abraham, but if one went unto them from the dead, they will repent. And he said unto them, if they hear not Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded, though one rose from the dead. Marvel not at this, Jesus says in John 5:28. The hour is coming when all that are in the graves shall come forth. They that have done good unto the resurrection of life, they that have done evil unto the resurrection of damnation. There is no second chance. There is not a paradise for everybody. There is not an obliviation of those who are wicked and sinful, but there is a place prepared for us after this life, and it's torment if we don't make it to paradise. When you breathe that last breath, you'll know. We don't see specifically the angels carrying the rich man into torments. I'm not even sure the angels want to go there. It's just where you end up. He lifted up his eyes. He was buried, and then he lifted up his eyes to torments. The angels are on the other side waiting for the faithful of God. And Jesus would have us to understand that even listening to this account of Lazarus and the rich man, marvel not at this, my friends, there's still more to come. The hour is coming when all that are in the graves, Lazarus, Abraham, Jacob, his 5 brothers here that is mentioned, when everyone's in the grave shall come forth. Lazarus, Abraham, all the faithful of God, they will hear Jesus say, "Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world." But these that are in the company of the rich man will hear Jesus say, "Depart from me, I never knew you." These shall go away into everlasting punishment prepared for the devil and his angels. Friends, that's not my word on it. You have Jesus' word. This morning, John said, "I give you record." Friends, we have a record about this life and the end of this life, and here it is. It's not something that we ought to marvel about. It's something that we ought to read and believe and accept and follow. As sure as there is a kingdom prepared for the righteous of God, there is a hell prepared for the devil and his angels and all of those who will not live love. And
In closing this evening, we wish to thank you again for spending your time in study with us. We hope the lesson has been uplifting and motivational. We encourage you to return again for our next lesson. Until then, may we invite you to visit our website. You will find many study opportunities. Our resource page has links to the Gospel Broadcasting Network, a 24/7 station with many great Christian programs and speakers. In Search of the Lord's Way, with Brother Phil Sanders. We have 2 links for Bibles and downloadable software. If you are looking to really expand your knowledge, perhaps you might like to try World Video Bible School, a college-level learning site free of charge. So, until next time, may God bless and keep you in His care as we walk together in His truth. And remember, as always, the churches of Christ salute you.